Perspective is a powerful drawing tool, but it can be tricky and elusive, and I've noticed one mistake that tends to ruin the illusion of depth that perspective is supposed to create. Hey, Walter here, and in this How Not to Draw video, we're talking about perspective. Perspective at its core is pretty simple. You draw a horizon line, you put a vanishing point in there, all objects recede to that vanishing point. Pretty simple, right? Now go draw all the draws and be amazed. But it hasn't really worked out that way for me. Like most things with art, it's more complicated than that, and it's more than meets the eye. Now this isn't meant to be a tutorial on perspective. There's a ton of tutorials out there. I'm gonna assume that you already have a little bit of a working knowledge with perspective. If not, go find some of those videos and then come back here. The big how not to with perspective is actually trusting perspective. You have to achieve scale and depth using perspective as a tool and not using perspective to give you scale and depth. Does that make sense? It's subtle, but it makes sense. All right, so here's our 2-point perspective setup. This is the horizon and the 2 vanishing points. All the lines converge to these 2 points. Now we can draw a box using these points. There you go, perspective in all its glory, but let's up the difficulty. We draw this box, and now what if we want to reproduce this box down here? Is this the same size? I don't know, kind of looks close. What about this one? This one definitely looks way off. So let's try to make it a little easier and just put one of these on the same path as our original. Okay, so this box is definitely wrong, but what about this one? Looks possibly legit, but it's actually very wrong. So there's this cool trick with perspective. If you take a square in perspective and run 2 diagonal lines across to make an X, it will always give you the center of the box. Then you can run a midline to give you the center all the way down to the vanishing point. Now if you run a diagonal from the top of one corner through this midline where it hits the far side of the box, you can transpose the length of the box. So basically you're taking that box and sliding it down in perspective and shrinking it the right amount, for lack of a better word. So now you know that that box is identical in length to the first box, and you can keep repeating this all the way down to make several identical boxes or windows or cars or people, whatever you want. Here's our original box. Here's one of the transposed boxes. Totally different. So this shows us that when objects begin to converge towards the vanishing point, they can rapidly start shrinking. So let's take a look at this room. Now this is a perfectly good drawing of a room. It's got some personality, you get an idea who lives in this room. It's good storytelling. This is perfectly fine. But since we're talking about perspective, let's actually dig a little bit deeper into the technical crap that we all love, right? Sure. All right, let's break the room down into its layout. Things start to look a little bit suspect in this view, but what's wrong? Let's do our little perspective trick to transpose the bed length a few times. Okay, now all these blue lines would be the length of the bed getting transposed across the room. So here's the first weird thing. This room is actually 3 bed lengths across. Sure, there are huge rooms out there, but not usually so sparse and so messy. Like this doesn't seem decorated like a large, expensive room. So the room should probably be smaller. The next thing is the desk. It's about half the size of the bed. Beds are usually around 6 to 7 feet long for a queen, so we're showing the desk is about 3 feet long. Most desks are usually 2 feet deep, so this isn't crazy off, but it's still just another thing to give a viewer a sense of wrongness, an uncanny valley. So what do? Do we spend hours meticulously measuring out this stuff? No, or at least not for me. I'm not gonna do that. I go back to trusting my mind and my gut. I like to sketch the room without using any horizon line or vanishing point. I mean, we all sort of know what a room looks like, right? Kind of. Now, if I was drawing a comic, I would probably just keep it like this and not do anything else. But if there was some weird part of it and I couldn't figure it out, I would pull out the vanishing points at that point to try to figure out if maybe a line was out of a place or if like an object was too big or too small. So we can compare the two. If we look at the original room we did and then look at the image we just did, if we ignore some of the set dressing, because the set dressing definitely makes the first image look a lot better, if we just pay attention to scale, we can see that the scale of the new room feels a little bit better. I think it's still way too big. It should be a lot smaller than this, which also brings up another thing. Do your best to stay away from this angle. It's a nightmare. It's a great angle for establishing a scene or a location, but because of that, it's also super hard to draw because you have to draw everything. And if you don't fill the scene up with a whole bunch of stuff, it looks really boring. So stay away from this. Try to lower that horizon line. The lower you put it, the less you have to draw. You can start hiding things behind foreground elements. And this also helps to kind of create an immersive panel, an immersive environment. So only use that overhead thing if you are being forced to. Here's another example of paying attention to depth and scale. Here we have a simple group of buildings. It looks perfectly fine. Draw some windows, some doors, and you're good to go. But let's do our little transposing trick and get the actual shrinkage factor. And look how quickly those buildings thin. Let's compare that to the original. Right? There's a huge difference in the sense of scale and depth. Looking at the original drawing on the right, it almost feels like the buildings are actually turning back towards the camera, kind of like this. There's a lot more to perspective than just converging lines to a point. It takes time to train your brain to make objects shrink fast enough. I think as starting artists, we want to draw objects straight on. Becoming comfortable with drawing less is actually pretty hard because it moves away from the iconography that we're used to. Like if you think about restrooms, like you see the man, you see the women, and it's like a simple iconic shape straight on. And this is how we want to draw, and trying to get better at art involves moving away from those simple images into a more complex, twisted and turned and shrunk, if you will, images. So that's how not to draw perspective. Make sure you sub to get notified about other how not to draw videos, and go check out some of my how to make comic videos. So what part of drawing frustrates you the most? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, be sure to like, link, love, hug, and sub for more sweet, sweet goodness. Peace.